Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. This is a crazy fucking time. And I don't even know where to start. And sometimes I just need to take a big step back and have a conversation with somebody I really like, who's really smart, who I'm interested in hearing from. And that's what we got. We got a returning champion, a two-time champion. This will be his third visit, coming during potentially the emergence of a civil war in America, the global unrest, and Super Bowl week. We have the great and powerful Matt Gallagher is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be back.
First of all, thank you for your flexibility, because this morning in my house was a total and complete shit show, where I have sick kid puking, maybe has COVID. We've had strep and everything else in the last couple of weeks. And as a dad, I know you can relate, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But my wife's assistant principal. We have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So something's always going on here. And also we have a 1-year-old puppy now, which adds to the chaos. So no, all good. Totally understand. Just hope the little guy's feeling a little bit better with some good meds right now.
He's watching Kung Fu Panda 4,
Nice.
3, and anticipating 4. So a little trash truck and Kung Fu Panda and staying home from school, I think is going to be just what he needs. I got to ask you, puppy with the little ones, good idea, terrible idea?
To have them?
To get the puppy, not the kids.
Oh. Once we get over, it's a golden retriever on top of it. So like very friendly, very active dog. They're all best friends and they're all maniacs together. So I think long-term it was a good plan, but short-term I did not anticipate just how chaotic it would be. I mean, chewed up Legos, this dog's stomach has got to be half Lego at this point. And I don't know, like our last golden was just like calm and mellow. It's just a different relationship. And dogs are like kids. They come out with ready-made personalities. And this one is, I don't know. He's stubborn as hell, which I respect, except when he's not listening. But I will say he loves the boys a lot. And you will have those moments like when they're cuddled up on the couch together watching a movie or something. You're like, okay, this is try to hold on to this moment next time you're about to like lose your mind shouting and nobody's listening.
That's kind of how I feel every day. And I think that's how a lot of people in America feel right now, especially those of us that are smart and maybe patriotic and reasonable and not partisan hacks or trying to make a buck off of the collapse of the world. And I want to get into everything. I want to get into your new book, Daybreak, which is coming out soon, that everybody should check out. I want to talk about Ukraine. I want to talk about Biden. I want to talk about the Super Bowl, because you're great to talk about all things culture. And I really just want to have a conversation about America. But let's start with the question I ask everybody. It's been almost a year since you joined us. Where are you and how are you?
Doing fine. I'm at my home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Book's coming out in 2 weeks. So kind of, trying to juggle dad life, take my kid to school, come back and work on an op-ed about Ukraine, walk the dog, answer some, PR emails from my publisher, doing a bit of a book tour, going across the country. So trying to schedule all those flights and all that travel. Then look at the clock. It's time to go pick up the kids from school. So a lot of balls in the air right now, just trying to remember the old army adage, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Just to get to the next task and get through it.
We had our friend Sebastian Younger on a couple years ago, and I think it was during COVID, and he described like trying to get shit done, or maybe it was writing, and he said it was like trying to go cross country with a kid on your lap or a monkey on your lap. I forgot what he said, but like, the chaos of it all. And I think it feels chaotic for everybody in America, and maybe that's part of why our country's not really good at strategic thinking or planning right now, or even getting things done. So like a no shit question from a guy who I respect and admire. How the hell are you get a novel done? Like, how do you do it? How do you get something that requires focus and thinking done in a chaotic environment with a great wife who's an educator, two kids, the dog, just the all of it. What's your pathway to getting stuff done, Matt?
This is my fourth book, my third novel, and I don't know. It was not my previous experience with writing fiction. It just kind of tumbled out of me. It's set in Ukraine. It's about the early days of the war. I think there's an urgency to it. Like it was maybe I could feel like it was maybe my small way to try to contribute to this, to try to wake people up to the human story, the human elements of what's occurring over there. I'm not a geopolitical expert. Not a retired general, obviously, so I can't talk at that level. But I think pretty good at kind of rooting out everyday human stories in the midst of war, in the midst of ruin. And I don't know, the whole process just kind of felt right. I would get up early, 6, and I'm not a morning person, but 6 a.m. the alarm would go off, and I knew I had a couple hours, brew some coffee, and get to work. I, God bless my wife. In the midst of writing this, I was able to escape for a month to the Hemingway Pfeiffer Museum, which is where Hemingway wrote A Farewell to Arms. And I was the writer in residence there. So I had a whole month over the summer. So she had I had to pay for my mother-in-law's plane ticket here to our house to help watch the kids. But that was huge. So I owed my wife and my mother-in-law tremendously for that month, because I made a lot of big important gains in that first draft over that residency.
What does that
But
place look like? What does it
it,
look like where you wrote, where Hemingway wrote? I mean, I went on a fellowship once to the Rockefeller Foundation. It may have been when we were working together, and I went to Bellagio in Italy, and I stayed in a suite that JFK stayed in for one night while he was waiting for a meeting with the Pope, because the Pope made him wait, and it was a writing residency, right? But what was Hemingway's writing space like?
slightly different. It's rural Arkansas, and it's the museum's this old home and this barn behind the home where his second wife he married his second wife largely for money, and they were kind of this very rich family in this rural part of Arkansas. They'd moved there from St. Louis, I believe, for the dad's health. They made their money in pharmaceuticals, I think. And Hemingway was kind of hated it, but they had this barn that they turned into kind of a writing space for him. They still have his desk, they still have his typewriter, and he would wake up and knock out a large part of Farewell to Arms. He's not fondly recalled by the local populace, both because of how he ended up treating this wife over the course of their marriage, but also because after he would get done writing, he would just kind of, in Hemingway style, get hammered with all the local young men and walk around shirtless in town, which is how they remember him, as just kind of this shirtless drunk. His name has a mixed reputation in the area, but a real beautiful museum. The residency was just a really unique opportunity, and I sat at the desk and worked on my novel the same place Hemingway worked on A Farewell to Arms. So I didn't summon his ghost, though, even when I tried.
A younger Matt might have been shirtless roaming around drinking
That's true. That's
in
true.
Arkansas, but we've all maybe mellowed or focused a bit. Let me ask you a question, Matt, that I want to just ask straight up. How fucked up is America right now? Because it feels very fucked up. And for me, it feels like every day I wake up and see another kind of dysfunction on the basics, right? We're having this conversation when the border bill stalls in Congress, funding's being revoked for not only Ukraine, but now for Israel. There's infighting constantly. I mean, I even feel like roads aren't getting paved, and the migrant crisis. It feels like America can't do anything anymore. And at the same time, we're doom scrolling and focused on shit. And I hate to sound like the old guy who's like, what the hell is going on in America? But I had this insight about Biden where I feel like Biden is America right now, because maybe America is over the hill. Maybe America is too old. Maybe America is beaten down, but has a really good heart and really cares, but just can't move fast enough. I feel like, especially our politics, just can't move fast enough for these times. And Biden, in many ways, people say, he's too old for us right now, but maybe he is us right now. What's your take? How fucked up is America, Matt Gallagher?
I think we're on the edge of being really fucked up. Being a father almost forces you to be a dogged optimist. I do think we can get out of this, but we're going to have to adapt to the pace of this world. Uh, we have senators and congressmen spent months trying to work on this bipartisan bill for the border that would also allow Ukraine to get aid, and they were making headway. It was taking too, like typical DC, it was taking too long, but they were getting somewhere, and it was going to pass, and it was going, it was going to be something. And all of a sudden, Trump puts the kibosh on it because it could be seen as a Biden win. Well, this inaction is what happens when you elect people who are anti-governance, right? Like, I mean, these aren't even political issues. We're not debating percentage of tax brackets. We're not debating the particulars of a Ukraine aid bill. This is what inaction is what you get when you elect people who are anti-government, right? So at a baseline level, if we want change, we as voters are going to have to stop voting for these people, right? Who revel in spectacle, who almost brag about not knowing the particulars, right? I mean, can we go a month without Marjorie Taylor Greene embarrassing herself, not knowing the rules of her job, right? Like, every time I see her on a committee, she's humiliating herself, and then somehow trying to turn that into a win. Yeah. So it's depressing. That said, with Biden, he's still there. He still he still talks about what America can be and what it can accomplish, and I think he believes that. And if he is America, then good. I personally, I'd rather have somebody who might be trying to force some false optimism on the rest of us than kind of a cynic nihilist who said, who's willing to say, well, this failed, so everything must fail. No, we can't have that. We cannot allow it. So don't get me wrong. I'm not I'm not ignoring the headlines and the state of everything is dark. But all we can do is keep grinding through. And I don't know, try to remember that, fighting about politics, having partisan battles is a normal part of a functioning democracy. That doesn't mean you just stop doing things. That doesn't mean that you just, well, no, we're going to wait till November to vote on this. If the border is a big deal, and I don't know if it's as big of a deal as Republican senators and congressmen say it is, but it needs attention, it needs action. Then do something. Do your job. Do your damn job. Quote Bill Belichick, do your job.
Yeah. So, and it's an upside down world where Bill Belichick gets rejected by the Atlanta Falcons, right? And there seems to be this. It feels like an upside down world. But the reason why I love talking to you, and I put you in a category like Sebastian and a couple other folks I've had on the show before, is because you're a conscience for America. You see the things and can put it together and connect the dots in stories and in your writing in a way that a lot of other folks can't. I think you've been that conscience now for over almost 20 years, right? And at the same time, politics, policy, culture, sports, and you spent a lot of time in your younger years in Nevada. So I got to ask you, South Carolina primary just happened, New Hampshire primary just happened, Nevada primary just happened. What is your takeaway? Like, what is Matt Gallagher, as someone who spent a lot of your life in that state? What did it tell you about that state, and what did it tell you about America? And the fact that, frankly, nobody even noticed it happened, right? I mean, most of America doesn't even know there were two primaries in the last week. But as a resident expert here on this show on that state, what are your insights?
Well, if you're a Haley supporter, I don't know how you look at that and feel good about it. And it's such a bizarre situation. You look at any general election poll, Nikki Haley probably wins next November. I mean, there's a decent amount of time, but she seems to be polling against Biden very well, and it is just so fascinating to me that Republicans are in this state where they're not voting for the most electable person. It's more about some kind of revenge. It's more about the Trump cult. It doesn't make sense to me. Like if you genuinely want a Republican in office, vote for the one who's clearly going to win. But that's whatever. I'm obviously I'm not a Republican, so they can do what they want, and when they lose again, they'll we'll get a whole new series of complaints and allegations of it being rigged and blah blah blah. Just
Or another
sore loser
insurrection.
bullshit.
Or another
Yeah,
insurrection.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully not that.
Yeah.
Hopefully not that. But
Yeah.
maybe you're
Yeah.
right. As for Nevada, Nevada is a really fascinating state. It always ends up being slightly more blue than it polls because of the culinary union, which was a big part of the old Harry Reid machine that is largely still kind of held together. It is a very it does have real conservative streaks in it. That said, it's been kind of electing the same type of politician, governor, for the last 50 years. They're middle of the road, casino approved, Republican or Democrat, silver haired middle aged man. But it doesn't matter which party, which I find fascinating. If I had to guess, it's the kind of state that might flip for Haley real close. But I see it sticking with Biden if it's Biden and Trump. There's the population that has been swelling in my old county, Washoe County, where Reno, Nevada is, and that's just going to be slightly blue. And that coupled with the Clark County, where Vegas is, the rural counties, which are predominantly conservative, just aren't going to be enough to turn that tide. But it's kind of a classic example of, like, if Republicans want to win, you have a candidate that could flip a state that voted for Biden last time. Trump's not going to win it, though. He's not. Like, I don't understand. I just don't understand, if he lost last time, how anything that's occurred since then is going to convince more voters to come back over. I don't know. It doesn't.
I think that's. Yeah, I think it's a really great insight into the way this election may be going, because I share that view, and I think that Trump is continuing to drive away independence that we've talked about a lot in the show. We saw it in New Hampshire, especially, and I think Nevada is the latest example of the Trump problem, which is driving away independence. And this Trump situation for the GOP has been like their Hillary Clinton, right? When so many of us were saying around the country, you don't understand how much people hate Hillary Clinton. They were like, no, but she's great, and here's all the reasons why she can win. But there was this deep hatred for her, right? That comes from a lot of stuff, and whether it's fair or not, especially those of us who spend time beyond New York and California and DC understand that. And that's kind of what Trump is facing now on the flip side, right? But he's facing this deep mistrust and hatred. And I think that's stacking up for him. And maybe for many of them, it's not about winning, right? Similarly, it's about blowing things up. And it's like an American insurgency. It's like a crusade. It's like a social movement. It's like a religion more than it is about winning elections, right? So to that point, I want to come to Ukraine in a second, but the Civil War conversation. This is a conversation that's happening now, right? I've got very serious people who email me sometimes and say, hey, could this happen, right? And I guess I want to ask you, I think the threat of violence is real. The threat of domestic violence is real. The frustration is real. We've talked about it in so many different ways, about how there is especially a disaffected group of men of a certain demographic who tend to have access to guns and tend to be disconnected, who might be predisposed to violence, who could be rallied on some level. Now, whether that develops into a civil war is another discussion, but 2024, Matt Gallagher, you've written about war, you understand war, you're a student of history. Civil war, what the fuck?
I think what you just said, drawing the line between armed violence and civil war, is very important. The threat of armed violence is very real. Go back a few years to the 90s, some radical army veteran like Timothy McVeigh blowing up a federal building. I think that's very plausible, right? It just takes a couple freaks with nothing to lose, and a lot of innocent blood can be spilled. Civil war, I just don't see it. I don't see it here. I spent time in Iraq during the Sunni Shia civil war. My college thesis was on the Irish Civil War. Frankly, like, I'm generalizing somewhat, but on a baseline level, we are just too fat and comfortable. Most civil wars in the history of the world emerge out of some real dire economic circumstances, on top of the political climate, on top of various partisan and cultural issues, cultural divides. Um, People need to be like hungry and needy to be willing to like go shoot their neighbor, by and
Mm,
large.
mm.
On the scale that would need to result in a civil war. The American Civil War, a big part of that. You know, most Confederate soldiers didn't own slaves. That doesn't mean that their economic livelihood wasn't tied to slavery, right? So they did feel like their everyday lives were at stake, right? That played a huge factor, maybe not necessarily on the top strategic decision level, but in terms of filling the ranks, in terms of actual fighting and engaging the Civil War. And I don't think we're there. Yeah, some loud, obnoxious, Proud Boys can show up and cause some serious issues, but in terms of like a sustained engagement, no, there's just not enough. There's not enough people, and people want to go back and watch Netflix. They want to play want to play Nintendo. They want to order DoorDash. Like we're too fat and happy for that kind of like dystopian climate to persist, I think.
Can we stay on that? Because I think this is part of the maybe one of the most urgent issues in America. And I think, you've got these like hard asses like the David Goggins of the world, right? And the Jockos who are like, everybody needs to be more disciplined. And that, that's a popular industry right now.
Sure.
But I think it is touching on something that's at the core of what many of us see and actually, I think, can recognize, especially if you've had a worldview, if you've been around, places of conflict. We are too fat and comfortable, right? Like there's a lot of folks who feel like we have too much to lose. We're too soft. And I've been really thinking about this a lot, Matt, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Our thought that we can be immune from the threats of Putin, that we can stay out of the Middle East, that we don't have to confront the threat of China, that we can lose only a couple soldiers every once in a while. I think those days are over, right? And I think it's a reality that our president is not addressing. I think most politicians are failing to address. I think someone needs to stand up and say to the American people, we're going to have people who die. We're going to have to pay a price. We're going to have to pay an economic price. We're going to have to pay a military price. We're going to have to pay a human blood price to live in this world and to exist in this world as we do. And if you're not willing to pay that price, we're going to go down. Like, I think it needs to be said in this framework, because the Europeans and others are looking at us like island America, saying, you think you can keep this up forever. But how do you think about that, about this time in America where we do feel fat and happy, and it feels like we're like a step away from a rattling, right? An October 7th moment or something that kind of rips us back into the reality of what the rest of the world is facing in 2024.
It does sometimes, especially with things happening across the world. It does kind of feel like the late 30s, where America wants to withdraw while simultaneously we're needed more than ever, and it's to our own best interest to engage with the world. I'm thinking of Yemen. A couple of weeks ago was a great example. Very clear cut issue of pirates trying to interrupt global commerce, right? Raiding and firing upon commercial ships, right? This is literally why the U.S. Navy was created back in the late 1700s, was to stop piracy. I personally like having access to cheap goods at my local pharmacy, at Target. This is part of globalization, right? Part of being a fat and happy American, benefiting from global trade. Well, you had, particularly on the hard left and the hard right, that kind of weird horseshoe theory point where isolationists meet, who are so used to condemning any kind of U.S. military action that suddenly these Houthi pirates are freedom fighters, are are the one, glorious rebels to be cheered for, and not oppressive maniacs who would do instantly slaughter many of the Americans championing them, if given the opportunity. And it was just bizarre to me because it was just like, maybe we should slow down the global shipping lanes just for a couple weeks, just so these people actually see the consequences of what not intervening would be, right? Nobody would be complaining louder that all of a sudden they have to pay, $25 for a Snickers bar, than these same people condemning any kind of U.S. military action because, well, they must be bad because, I went to a protest once in 2004, and that formed my entire worldview for the rest of my life.
Right.
So that's just kind of one anecdote out of many, unfortunately, that's occurring in the world right now, where I think you're onto something, like waking Americans up to the world and to the world's issues, not just on a moral level. I think these things are important, but some people don't think that way. Well, okay, how about how it affects you? How about on a geopolitical level, impacting what you pay for at a grocery store, impacting, hey, you don't want your kid to get drafted 5-10 years down the line, then maybe you should pay more attention to Ukraine and educate yourself on these issues, because whether you like it or not, Putin is coming. These issues are coming for us. And do you want to engage with them now, or do you want to stick your head in the sand and pretend they're not happening?
Yep. I think this is one of the most important conversations that I think you and I have been having with each other and with, the world for 20 years now, right? It's kind of the civil military divide and the disconnect from the realities of combat and conflict and pain that those of us who have been exposed to it profoundly in the last 20 years, we feel like Paul Revere, right? And I still feel like that, right? We felt like that after 9/11. Now it's upside down world where, we have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here is actually true, right? Like we actually have to, the jingoism is coming full circle. But I also go back to Biden, and I know I bang on him a lot, but he's the commander in chief, and I've been doing that to every one of them for 20 years, right? And I think that's appropriate. But I think Biden is often too weak and too slow. I keep saying this. He's too slow and he's too weak on Afghanistan, on Ukraine, on the Houthis, maybe on China. We'll be saying the same thing if that's the case. But I also feel like your point about the frozen worldview is really, really, really important, because sometimes Biden feels like his worldview is frozen. And I've often said, maybe not in public, that the real national security advisor to Joe Biden is Beau Biden, the ghost of Beau Biden, right? And he was so informed by Beau's experience. And once Beau died, it was frozen. Like it didn't evolve after that. Afghanistan was set. His views on the Middle East were set. And it feels like he hasn't been able to evolve since then. And now we're in this place where, Ukraine is falling like his popularity. And your new book is focused on Ukraine. I've invited you and you've asked if you could read something from it. I'll let you do that whenever you think it's appropriate. But Ukraine is the issue, right? And you and I talk about this a lot in private conversations and with other leaders. And we're rallying behind something that we all do believe in, the great fight of our time, and we're struggling to drag everybody forward on it. So I think we feel like this is the make or break year, right? Now, we keep talking about the election, but it does feel like this is the make or break year in Ukraine and in confronting Putin. I just want to let you run with the ball in Ukraine, right? And your book, and tell us about the book and what it means and what you want folks to take away from it, and just, unpack some of that in relation to Ukraine specifically.
What's so frustrating with Ukraine is it has been a bipartisan failure. I think Biden and the administration made some great calls early in terms of broadcasting the intelligence they had about Russian troop movements, not just sharing it with Ukraine, but announcing it to the world, right? Since then, for whatever, when Ukraine was advancing, Jake Sullivan in particular, and they kind of started instituting these half measures, right? Every aid package was either half filled or didn't come with everything that the Ukrainians were desperately saying that they needed. It always came too late. Even the HIMARS, those came too late. Everything's always coming months too late, which has put Ukrainian leaders in a tremendously awkward position of, needing to thank its benefactors, but then asking for more, right? I've heard you describe it as the mother may I phenomenon. Well, we created this, right? Because we thought we could control and overmanage, and none of these dudes ever wore a uniform. None of these dudes have ever shot a gun at a human being or been fired upon. And I think that showed with this, right? That kind of hubris of being able to manage a conflict. And now, year and a half, year later, the tables are completely turned, and those same Democratic aides, to include Sullivan, are the ones rightly barnstorming Congress, saying, if we don't get this through, it might be a matter of months. Well, you know, a lot of this is on you. Yeah, you're doing the right thing now, but you still deserve all kinds of blame for letting things get to this point. The anger from Ukrainians towards America as a country is real, towards other European countries as well. That there's a real sense of betrayal, and it's hard to say that they're wrong about that, right? Last July, Biden said we would stand with Ukraine no matter how long it took, no matter what it took. Something to that effect. That was July 2023. That was not that long ago, and the feeling of abandonment is real. I hope we manage to get this aid package through to prove to them that it's not, to prove to Ukraine that we are the country they need us to be, that some of them still think we are. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about George Orwell and his experiences in the Spanish Civil War, in terms of how that ended up kind of being a precursor for World War II, that had more Western democracies engaged with more seriously at the time. World War II would not have played out the way it did, because the lesson from that was two dictators and two autocrats was that democracies can be outweighted, they can be outlasted, they can be defeated through a combination of battlefield and propaganda, right? That we are, what did Hitler call England? Like a nation full of shopkeepers.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty similar to what Putin thinks Americans are. So, where this inattention comes from, I don't know. I find it infuriating. I do know that the closer you get to Donbass, having been to Ukraine, the more serious people take this. There's a reason the Baltic states are taking this as seriously as they are, because they know they're next. Same with Poland. I mean, there are entire companies of volunteer Poles fighting for Ukraine right now because they know they're next. And anybody that has a passing understanding of history of Eastern Europe knows Ukraine and Poland don't have a particularly good history amongst each other, but this is bonding them. So it's a make or break moment. It's a make or break moment for Ukraine. It's a make or break moment for America's role in the world, right? I mean, like you just referenced Afghanistan, and as terrible a tragedy as that was, the withdrawal was, we had been there 20 years. Quitting on Ukraine after 2.5 would be pathetic, and would be a flare, a giant flare to the entire world, that we're not what we used to be, and that we can be, for all our tough talk, we can and will be pushed around. Putin will be coming deeper into Eastern Europe. China, we all know China wants Taiwan, right? I can't tell you how much of an impact it was on me personally, being in Eastern Ukraine and hearing from them, everyday people who still believe in America and still believe that we can be a beacon of freedom, and all these ideals that we talk about, they are very real and meaningful to them, because they really haven't had them, right? Only the younger generation has had a taste, and that's why they're fighting for it. A completely different experience than my time in Iraq. And there's, won't get into that because there's a whole slew of other reasons why, but it would be a tremendous betrayal with all kinds of unforeseen consequences. Yeah, I can't urge Americans enough to call their congressmen and tell them to get off their asses and do something about this. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what's being accomplished. Ukraine, as brave and tenacious as they are, they need our weapons. They've eradicated roughly 30 to 40% of Russia's combat power in 2 years, and the only Americans who have died have been volunteers. right? Not one of our troops have been killed or has even set foot in Ukraine. Any American who's been killed there has gone as a volunteer. Many of them, I think, over 30 U.S. military veterans. This is so clear cut. It remains so clear cut. But Kremlin propaganda, I think, has been able to make the headway that its own army just could not.
Matt, I think you every time you're on, you make a really good assessment and projection and call to action, call to arms on Ukraine. I mean, the thing I've been thinking about is, the Civil War threat is not real, but the World War III threat is. Right.
Yeah,
And that I think
sure.
that's the headline for me, right? 2024, we probably won't have a civil war, but we may already have a world war, right? And be closer to that than ever before. Let me bring you back to the book, the new book. Tell us about Daybreak. Tell us what you think is most important. It's coming out February 20th. Folks can pre-order it now. I encourage them to do that. As an author myself, I know that that's really key. So go on any book, whatever, and order a bunch of them. But Matt, tell us what you think is most important to know about Daybreak, and then we're going to talk Super Bowl. But first, Daybreak.
Sure. Daybreak is a novel. It's set during the early days of the invasion, February 2022, and it follows a pair of U.S. military veterans into Ukraine. One, Han Lee, is eager to join the fight. He's found life back in the States really unfulfilling, and he sees this as the just cause that always eluded him. The other, Luke Paxton, kind of has more muddled reasons. He's kind of been stuck in everyday civilian life too, but he hasn't been able to shake a Ukrainian woman he'd once known and loved, named Svetlana, and he can't stop thinking about her because Ukraine's all over the news. We all remember those weeks when nothing but Ukraine was on the news, and it looked like Kyiv was going to topple, and there was this courageously brave stand by the Ukrainian military. So it's an everyday human story. It's deeply informed by my own time over there, both as a volunteer and as a journalist. Contains kind of, emotional truths, maybe that I couldn't source in my journalism, or second or third hand anecdotes I heard about Western veterans who'd gone over there to fight for Ukraine that, I couldn't, for a variety of reasons. Maybe they told me off the record or whatever. But seeds were collected for this story kind of throughout my various trips over there. So it's a dark love story. I don't want to mislead people into thinking that this is a super happy tale, but it's real. It's honest. It shows. It's a story, I think, of human grace and regret and courage, both of soldiers willing to fight and die for a country or an idea, but also civilians, caught who by terrible geographic luck are caught in a situation that they wanted nothing to do with and have no choice but to try to endure and survive it for the people they love. So maybe read the first couple pages just to give people a taste of it.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I think a page would be great. And maybe our Patreon members, if Matt's got an opportunity to stick around, I'm going to ask him a couple follow-up questions about the book as well. But yeah, maybe a couple of paragraphs, if you can, that you think are you're doing the reading thing now, right? And here's what I tell folks too. Buy it because it's a Matt Gallagher production. Anything this man writes, you should consume, you should read, you should share, because it's excellent, it's important, it's urgent, it's entertaining, it's all the things. So please, Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. This is page one of the book, page one of Daybreak. The bus pitched east through midnight black, and Luke Paxton sat with his head against the window, alone with his thoughts. Winter clawed at him through the glass, but he kept himself nestled against it. He found the tinges of outside cold bracing and wanted to keep awake. He wet his throat and stared out at the flurries of snow dusting the road. Dark, baleful forest lay beyond. A convoy of supply Humvees crested a small hill, pushing the other way, toward the border. Something sharp and hot swelled in Pax's chest. Haven't felt like this in a long time, he thought. It was thrill. It was fear. More than anything, Pax felt like someone again. They'd crossed an hour before. First had come potholes, then bunkers and checkpoints with barrels of fire licking at the night. The checkpoints were for show, performative, barely better than nothing, and maybe not even that. Men with flashlights and slung hunting rifles, a gesture at presence for the sake of itself. What they need, Pax thought, is razor wire. Some HESCO barriers staggered to force vehicles into a funnel. A machine gun on overwatch ready to snuff out any runaways and squirters. The basics. They'll learn, he thought. It's all new here. The bus slowed over an old bridge, reaching a village. Brittle Ukrainian sounded through a loudspeaker, reminding of the national blackout. At a bend, a tiny church glowed dim, a mural of Jesus holding a candle charting through the snow. Pax blinked and blinked, but the image stayed with him long after they left. He hadn't believed for many years, but still wanted to be a person who could. Across the aisle, Lee was draped over his assault pack, snoring away with the clean conscience of a man who knows his place in the world. Pax had dressed to blend in, jeans, a simple black jacket. Lee wore a hoodie with a skull superimposed in front of crossed rifles, the word infidel screaming above the logo. He'd raised the sleeves to his elbows to show off his tattoos of flames and razor wire and old unit crests. A name tape and subdued American flag patched across his assault pack, completing the look. When Pax had teased him about it at the airport, Lee had dug in. I'll be the only Asian around for a fucking 1,000 miles. People need to know they're dealing with a killer. He wasn't, though. That was the whole thing. Lee's kill had eluded him through all his deployments, always seconds late to the firefight, a hesitant lieutenant at his shoulder, or a vexing, oblivious civilian standing between him and his chosen glory. It was just luck, happenstance, like so much else in combat. But Lee hadn't been able to shake the sense of lost purpose in the homeland. So now he was here to again carry the gun. We gotta be there, man, Lee had said when he'd reached out over the phone, trying to find a travel partner as crazy or bored as he was. They need people like us. They? Us? Open questions. Pax had said yes, since no one else would. He'd heard it in Lee's voice, something between despair and disgust, because he'd had no reply for Lee's next line, delivered with all the subtlety of an ice pick. What else you got going on? So,
Bravo, man. Bravo.
thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for putting it down. We got to be there. That is maybe encapsulates a lot of what you and I have been talking about over the last couple of years. I mean, I think, before 9/11, I was one of many who was looking for the fight of our time. And I think we've been, many ways, Afghanistan, Iraq, we've been kind of searching for it. And now the fight of our time is here. And the question is, do we recognize it and do we meet it? Right. And your work, again, pulls it all apart in a way that only you can, man. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing it. I hope everybody gets the book. You're also one of my favorite people to talk about all things American culture. So to shift gears in an abrupt way, you got to be there when it comes to the Super Bowl if you're an American, right? It's like a default fucking national holiday. And I actually love that about it, right? It feels like one of the few times Americans actually come together and have something to talk about for a couple weeks. And that universal conversation, even with people who are not football fans, is really important. Every year the Super Bowl is different, like culturally, right? We've got the Taylor Swift effect. We've got Kelsey. We've got the Mahomes dynasty. We've got so many pieces, but a big question, like what does this Super Bowl mean for America? Is it a reflection of our tone deafness while we're having this pageantry and Ukraine is starving for weapons, or is it a demonstration of our grandeur? What is Matt Gallagher's take on Super Bowl 2024?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that we've even managed to politicize this, right? That you have supposedly serious thinkers who are convinced that Taylor Swift is a CIA psyop. And that this is all some, part of a scheme to win the election in 2024. And I just want to, if these shadow men, if shadow men in the government had this kind of power, why wouldn't they just put Trump in jail, right? Like why would they go through all these machinations through Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and bribing NFL refs? Like
And the conspiracy is that Taylor Swift is a CIA agent or a CIA operative, right? And she's here to stop Donald Trump. And this has all been manufactured to defeat Donald Trump, right?
These people need something to do, Like they need to go volunteer at a soup kitchen. They need a dog to take to the park.
Yeah.
These people need something to do. They need to log off the internet and stop talking to the crazy people in all the other towns because it's just insane.
But like every conspiracy, Matt, there's also like a kernel of insight or truth, right? Which is Taylor Swift is not a fan of Donald Trump, and she's a powerful fucking force, right?
Sure,
And,
sure, and they
we've
should
talked,
fear her. But like,
yeah,
it's not news that a liberal celebrity might have sway on their fans,
yeah.
right?
We
Like,
talked about this. I talked about this, I think, with Smirkanich a couple weeks ago. Like, if the Democrats really had their shit together, they'd be recruiting Swift and Jason Kelsey to run, and they'd fucking be a whole lot more successful than Joe Biden and Amy Klobuchar, whoever else they come up with, right?
oh, Jason Kelsey would be the perfect vice president, and go shirtless. Can you see him? Hanging out at like NATO summits.
Can you imagine the rallies? I mean, he would fill stadiums. I
it would
mean,
be incredible.
and people say, this is the part too, though, Matt. I mean, some of these people in the political world, I go on the news shows, I'm going on them today. They're so they're so up in their own shit, right? Where they don't see the power of Taylor Swift or Jason Kelsey or The Rock, or they're so uppity about so many things that they don't realize that Americans are just starving for somebody who keeps it real and brings some energy and inspiration. If Dan Campbell ran for something, like, how much would that guy the coach of the Lions, how much would that guy crush?
I'd run through a wall for that guy.
I mean, he should run for mayor of Detroit. I mean, if I don't know who the mayor of Detroit is, but he should be mayor, governor, the whole fucking deal, right? I mean, who's putting Detroit on the map like Dan Campbell?
Oh, they were so close too. I mean, just heartbreaking.
Is that? Look, I wanted to ask you this. I thought about this today. Is that also like? Is that America 2024? Like, we're rooting for Detroit and they fucking blow it? Like, they blew it, right? They did blow it, and they were everybody's like sweetheart. We wanted it so bad. Those of us who think about all the things around it, and Detroit kind of flaming out against the Niners. That's kind of 2024 too, right?
To get close, yeah, because no objective fan wanted Kansas City and San Francisco. Like, this is we had this 5 years ago. Personally, I think it's gonna be kind of boring. I think KC rolls pretty easily. It you know it, Andy Reid's fun, Kelsey's fun, but rooting for a dynasty is always hard. But it is what it is. Yeah,
When we're old guys, I want to ask you about that. Do old guys hate dynasties more than young guys? Because I feel like my kids love this. Like, my kids are loving my kids love the Chiefs, right? My kid wears a Mahomes jersey. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a Giants fan, but I still loved the Niners, right? Like, I was like, wow, the Niners are awesome. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Rathman. Those I love the dynasty. Do you feel like older guys get more cynical about dynasties than younger guys?
Probably in general, and also especially if we just survived the Brady years, right? Like, we just don't want to go straight into another one. I will say, as a tortured Browns fan, who grew up mostly around Niners fans out west, so I still have kind of like an old childhood tick, like something Irish fatalism or contrarianism. Like, a key part of my personality was formed when I decided to root for the Browns instead of the Niners, and I've suffered immensely because of that decision, but I stand by it. I will say that my youngest son, because here in Tulsa, the Chiefs are the big team, and he's a big Chiefs fan. He loves Travis Kelsey in particular, and I'm not dissuading him. If this brings him a little happiness and joy, it is not for me to force otherwise. Whereas his older brother is a Browns fan and has made that choice, and I don't have the heart to talk him out of it either, even though I'm pretty sure 40, 50 more years of misery await, because that is just the Cleveland way.
It's building character, though, man. Like, if I'm in a foxhole, I want a Cleveland fan or a Buffalo fan with me. I do. Like, that's the real deal, right? And my kid, my 4-year-old, who's obsessed with sports, has flipped it on me completely, and he's a Celtics fan. And anybody who's, I don't know, knows me knows my little guy is just obsessed with the Celtics. And it's not because he wants to give a middle finger to me. It's because they were winning when he was little, and because he thought that Jake from State Farm was Jason Tatum. And he'd been seen so many State Farm commercials with Jake, not black Jake, not white Jake, right? When they changed Jake from State Farm, he was always on TV, and they're like, "Oh, Jake from State Farm." I said, "No, son, that's not Jake from State Farm. It's Jason Tatum." And he said, "Oh, well, I like him." That's when he was 2.5, and it stuck. Yeah. And now he's a Celtics fan, which is like kind of a middle finger to me. But what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, no, and you're just happy they're happy, and they're enjoying the game, right? Like it's just kind of a great way to participate in something with your kids, and if the Celtics don't get it done this year, I don't know. You might have to start preparing for heartbreak because that team is loaded, and there's only so many years you can have excuses about being too young or whatever. Like if they can't pull it off this year, I don't know.
I
Maybe
want to stay. I want to stay on sports with you for a second because we don't do it enough on this show, and I think it's great and it's important and it's fun, and you're great on it. How fun is the NBA right now? Like, I was at the Nets game last night. My buddy gave me his tickets, and we went. And my one kid was sick, but he wasn't going to miss it. We went and watched the Nets play against Luka and Kyrie, who were both fucking dominant. Every time Kyrie got the ball, everybody booed him. And I had to explain to my son it's because Kyrie was an anti-vaxxer and a selfish player who sat down when his team needed him and missed every home game. And then you've got Luka, who's really unbelievable. Like, I watched him warming up, man, and they were having so much fun. Like, that team is bouncing the ball up for dunks and shooting from the stands. And it really felt fun, but it feels like we're kind of in a golden age of the NBA. Does it feel that way to you?
yeah, and from it's like skills based, right? Like
Yeah.
the way people can shoot and move now, like it's beautiful basketball. I watched a couple weeks ago the OKC Thunder, which are our local team here, play the Spurs. So you had Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren. I mean, these are two teenage kids whose skill level is unbelievable. They're monsters. 7 foot plus. Have some filling out to do still, but like, can you imagine these guys in 10 years? It is.
Yeah,
It's just a
Wembanyama's
treat.
like 7'4" and running the floor like a point guard. I mean, behind the back shit. I mean, they're also just like physical freaks, right? Like, I feel like this is like the evolution of humanity in 2024, where we're finding these people and building these people. I mean, Luka's a 6'8" point guard or something, right? 6'9" point guard. He's gigantic. It's a freak show, right?
And they're from all over the world because
Yeah.
the game has gone international, right? Like gone are the days of discovering 14, 15-year-old Dikembe Mutombo and then trying to teach him up. Luka's from Slovenia, been playing since he was a kid. Victor's from France, been playing since he was a kid. Chet's from Wisconsin. Like it's a cool thing, and in its own strange way to link the conversation. It's a reminder that American soft power remains, as much as maybe fraying in other places. American soft power remains undefeated. Our culture, our sports, our music, it's everywhere.
I love that. I love that. And I want to stay on that because I think it's true. America's soft power is undefeated. If you haven't coined that phrase, that's yours, man. Put that on a t-shirt and use it at every book event. But there's also a point in this too, where there aren't a lot of assholes. Like, there are some guys getting in trouble. You got John Morant getting busted for a gun, but there are a lot of positive role models out there. I feel like more, you got a guy like Mahomes. Like, he's a great dude, right? Like, you got a guy like Luka, Jalen Brunson here in New York. I mean, there's so many of them. My son soured on Max Verstappen, the F1 driver, when he was like 7 or so, because Max is an asshole and he talks to people rudely. But he's a rarity. Like, we used to complain about, Ray Lewis was featured at the Pro Bowl recently, right? I mean, when we don't have Ray Lewis around, we've got these guys now from all sports that are really. Aaron Judge is another great example. Shohei Ohtani, these folks that are really great role models, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Almost makes me maybe I've gotten old. I almost miss having villains. Because it adds like a WWE element of like, say what you will about Tom Brady. And God knows I said plenty of things about him. He was fun to root against because he was good and he knew he was good, right? Like that kind of cocky edge. Patriots fans loved him for it, and deservedly so. And he was fun to root against that because of it. And it made when goofy Eli beat him twice all the more memorable. Kobe.
And we've got real villains, right? Like, it feels like we've got enough real villains in the world that we don't need the villains in the NBA.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so you're going to stick around for a couple extra questions for our Patreon members. Final prediction, again, go get Daybreak. root for Matt. He is a role model and he is a great voice and a great leader for our country. What's your final prediction on the game on Sunday?
Chiefs 31, Niners 20. And not just because the NFL wants the Chiefs to win, just because it's a quarterback driven league. And like I know it's a cute story and everything, but Patrick Mahomes is on track to be the GOAT. And always bet on the better quarterback in a big game.
You got it. I mean, you and I have talked about this thing. They used to say defense wins championships in the NFL. It doesn't anymore. Quarterbacks do. And in the NBA, defense doesn't win anymore. Scoring wins, right? It's flipped.
Yes.
But
it
I
has.
think
It has.
this is a golden age for sports. It's a golden age for the need for people to read books again, right? So I want to encourage everyone, check out Matt's book, support him. Thank you for all you do, my friend, and thank you for keeping it real. You always keep it real, and you stitch together the pieces in such an important way. You're really one of the most important writers and voices of our time, and I'm grateful for your friendship and for just always coming on the show and having a good time with me. I wish you all the best with the book and the best to your family.
Thanks so much, Paul. Always a pleasure talking with you, and I'm grateful for your friendship as well. And yeah, I'll give Annie and the boys your love.
I'm going to pick the same score. I was going to say by 10. So I'm with you, man. I say Chiefs win it. You know, the MAGA folks are going to have a bit of a heart attack, and you know, Taylor Swift is the ultimate marketing genius. I mean, there's no way the engagement isn't coming in the next year, and she doesn't play the Super Bowl next year, right?
That's amazing. And I think the internet would melt if at the post game celebration while the Chiefs are celebrating, she takes off a Chiefs sweatshirt to have a Biden Harris. Oh my God, people would lose their mind.
Well, and I'm going to make a way out there prediction because you do this in your books. What's really going to be interesting is President Wes Moore at the American Olympics in LA. That's going to make the internet melt, and who knows what's going to happen with that. But I see this coming. If anybody watched Wes Moore around the Ravens this year, it's coming. And you and I both know him. We root for him. I think this guy could be president by next time when we have the Olympics in LA. So look for that.
Wes.
Thank you, Matt. Stay vigilant, my friend.
Thanks again, Paul.